Yuma, welcome to this ABC News special. In the lead up to the ACT election on the 17th of October, we've been looking at some of the significant issues facing Canberrans. Cost of living is increasing, and that's driving some Canberrans to look outside the ACT border. Others, though, are making really big sacrifices in order to call Canberra home.
It's the middle of winter and Diana Smith is heading to work.
I work in Belconnen. My commute is probably as bad as it gets in Canberra, but you get used to it. We didn't grow up in Canberra, but we've been in Canberra long enough that we feel Canberran, and if anyone asks where I'm from, I always say I'm from Canberra.
But technically, that's not the case. 5 years ago, the Smiths sold their Canberra home and bought this slice of land in Googong, over the border in New South Wales.
There's an affordability factor, which we found ruled us out of a lot of the areas that we quite liked.
Over the border, they found the lifestyle they craved, with cash to spare. Their mortgage is cheaper, so too are car rego and insurance, household rates and bills.
It was something horrendous. It was like over $3,000 for our first winter gas bill for our house in Canberra. And when you compare that to the $170 odd or whatever it costs us now for our gas here, I don't think it will ever leave me, no.
So I think main cost of living pressures here is obviously rates have increased pretty strongly.
Ben Phillips heads up a social and economic modelling team at the ANU. And his numbers suggest Canberra is doing pretty well.
By and large, the households in the ACT have got much higher incomes than the rest of the country. And in terms of our cost of living pressures, they haven't changed much in the last 10 years, which is a pretty similar story right across the country.
His research pours a bit of cold water on the familiar idea of the so-called Canberra tax, but does identify pockets of stress. Electricity prices have seen a sharp increase over the past 5 years. Petrol price rises have been marginally higher than other regions. Overall, compared to the rest of the nation, taxes have increased substantially, but rates are the headline figure.
So it's certainly true to say that rates have increased sharply in the ACT in the last 10 years. I'd say they've roughly doubled in the last sort of 9 to 10 years, and that's more so than any other capital city around the country.
On a national scale, Canberra's population is relatively young, with low unemployment and higher than average incomes. But the road is not smooth for everyone. Emily and Kieran Lester are on the hunt for a new rental home after being told they have to leave their current property.
Yeah, nice vanity.
It's a tight market. The couple has been to more than 40 rental inspections in the past fortnight.
Are you getting sick of them?
Yes.
That's an understatement.
Every house looks the same almost now.
They're not picky. They just want a home with a working air conditioner and a backyard for their pets.
We're not low income, but we're not high income. We're in that bracket where we're somehow supposed to survive.
According to ANU research, median rent in Canberra is similar to Melbourne, but lower than in Sydney. But for those who aren't on a public service income and don't qualify for social housing, rent can chew up a large portion of your wage.
We make sure that the money for our rent is covered
Before we eat.
And if it comes to a roof over our head or eating, it'll always be a roof over our head.
Home ownership is still a dream for the Lesters, and right now they just need to find somewhere to live. So while the figures might suggest Canberra's a well-off community, plenty are still struggling to make ends meet. Or choosing to cross the border to get ahead.
The bush capital is getting bigger, and 100,000 new homes will need to be built over the next 20 years. But some wonder if that growth threatens the Canberra way of life.
Even on a wintry Canberra day, Peter and Margaret Callan love the city they call home.
Not sure I'll need the brolly.
Oh, it's looking bright now. Yeah. So pull the gate shut.
They've lived on Jumoresque Street in Dixon on and off for 40 years.
And do you remember we lived in that one
Yeah, I know.
for 6 months at the beginning.
I know, and that's what made us really like the street.
When they bought, the homes were cheaper and much more modest, on old school, quarter-acre blocks.
It was relatively inexpensive to buy in, and we certainly feel for the people who move here these days that the cost for them is phenomenal.
While other parts of Dixon are changing, their neighbourhood still looks largely the same. It's a life Peter and Margaret want the next generation to enjoy, but they're not convinced Canberra's newer suburbs can provide it.
I'd like to be more optimistic for those new suburbs because that's where people's homes are now, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time.
Canberra's population is projected to boom over the next 2 decades, from 427,400 to 589,000. Those new Canberrans are going to need somewhere to live. ACT planners predict the city would need 100,000 new homes by 2041. That's 12 new homes a day. Finding smarter ways to house growing populations is architect Melinda Dodson's specialty. For her, the answer to Canberra's planning challenge is what she calls the missing middle, medium density homes, like townhouses.
The townhouses here, they have their own privacy in terms of privacy within the house and privacy in the gardens.
She has misgivings about what's emerging on the city's northern and western fringes.
We are 2 cities at the moment. We have newer suburbs, greenfield suburbs on the edge of town that are taking on a different character. They're more roofscape than landscape. We just start to see less trees in suburbs where it's more dominated by larger houses on smaller blocks.
Rather than bulging at the city fringes, more space has to be found within existing suburbs.
If we continue to pursue a mix of urban consolidation and new developments, I think Canberra will continue to be a wonderful city.
Canberra is facing some tough decisions about where to put 100,000 new homes. Right now, the plan is much more of this. But is that really how Canberrans want to live? Nabila Hussain and Mahbooba Rahman bought into the Molonglo Valley a few years ago.
Oh no, let's go. All the people were new, the community was new, the vibe was different, and it's a new vibe, so really liked it, yeah.
Let's go to the shopping.
But there are growing pains here too. With no nearby supermarket, they've got to leave their community for basic groceries. They say Molonglo hasn't quite taken on the shape they expected when they moved in.
It seems like a little bit more dense than I thought.
They'd love more community facilities, like a hall and more sporting fields.
Definitely it can always be improved. I think there is a need for a consultation between the people living in the suburb and the urban planners.
Whether it's big homes on small blocks in new estates, or old leafy suburbs under increasing pressure to rebuild, Canberra is changing. And you can bet your house that not everyone's going to like this new look bush capital.
Canberra's booming population is also putting significant pressure on transport infrastructure. While light rail has improved public transport, the bus system is still lagging behind, and many Canberrans still need a car to get to and from work.
Good morning, Phil.
Morning, Tom. How are you?
Good, how are you?
You're good.
Phil Rumble has been catching public transport in Canberra since he was a kid. This is his morning commute. The public servant walks from his Gungahlin home to the nearest light rail stop.
I end up here at the Nullarbor tram stop.
It's a tram to Civic, then onto a bus to work in Deakin in the inner south. The journey takes him an hour.
And how long do you think it would take to drive?
About 15 to 20 minutes. Big difference.
Fortunately for Phil, it's not just about time. He says it's a habit and a chance to watch the world go by.
A lot of people, though, wouldn't do what you do. They'd choose to drive instead in Canberra.
Yeah, a lot of people do. Just for convenience, I dare say. Some parts are free parking. Compare us to, say, Sydney or Melbourne. Hustle and bustle.
But far more of us are like Sarah Crow from Tuggeranong.
I choose to drive to work just purely because it's more convenient for me. I not only drive to work, but I drop my dog off at daycare on the way, and I also go to the gym after work, all of which I feel would be nigh on impossible to do on public transport.
On a good day, it's a 15 to 20 minute drive from Richardson to her office in Civic. The bus can take about an hour. Light rail is not an option.
We're just a very car-focused city. I think our roads are fantastic. I think the suburbs are very well set out for cars. In my view, I feel like they're not designed with public transport or walking or cycling and things in mind.
Urban planners say Canberra is recovering from its legacy of being designed around the car.
In many ways, we're trying to retrofit a car-based city into a really modern, contemporary 21st century city, a much more sustainable city.
Census data from 2016 shows the car is king, with about 5 in every 6 Canberrans choosing to drive to work. Fewer than 1 in 12 catch public transport, the same for walking or cycling. And, as yet, no evidence that light rail has significantly changed these numbers.
Things like bicycle infrastructure are great, but on mornings like this morning where it's -2, it might not be everybody's cup of tea to ride.
Michael De Percy researches transport infrastructure policy. He believes the city's transport woes stem from the city's spread out geography, with underserviced pockets well away from the main arterial routes. He agrees with government moves to jack up parking prices and perhaps even introduce toll roads to encourage people to ditch their car.
Part of the problem with building more roads and making the roads more efficient is that it increases the demand for roads. So, of course, every time we duplicate a major route, a road corridor, then of course more people tend to use it, which creates the traffic problem once again.
Of course, traffic is less of an issue right now with fewer cars on the road, and health officials are urging people to reconsider public transport in peak times during the pandemic. Bus and tram use collapsed in April. There's been a slight bounce as restrictions have been eased, but the latest data still shows the number of people using public transport is dramatically down on last year's levels.
It's unknown when bus or tram use will return to pre-COVID levels, and working from home may have irreversibly altered the daily commute as we know it. It's got urban planners asking what's the future of our cities and how should public transport accommodate a growing population.
Barbara Norman says it's a chance to revitalise tired suburban hubs and redesign a public transport system tailored to the community.
It isn't just about going back to where we were, because the nature of work and transport and journey to work, from home to work, is changing too. So we don't quite know what it's going to look like.
As we try to address our dependency on cars and fill in gaps in the bus network, the slow build of light rail won't solve the city's connectivity problems. So as the city grows, public transport policy will continue to drive the political conversation.
Experts are warning that Canberra's healthcare system is not equipped for the needs of the growing city. In the last 6 years, demand for ACT hospitals has grown by 50%, and elective surgery waiting lists have blown out as well. So just who is best equipped to deal with the challenges within the ACT's healthcare system?
William McLennan's got a new wheelchair, and he's finding out just how fast it can go.
Yeah, I nearly came first.
William's got spinal muscular atrophy. 1 in 10,000 children are born with the condition.
In basic terms, it's the childhood version of motor neuron disease.
Earlier this year, a broken leg saw him spend a long stretch of time in the Canberra hospital, about 10 weeks all up.
To be honest, I can't really fault them at all. They were fantastic right through when William was admitted, right to us leaving. You know, I couldn't fault them. They worked extremely hard.
William's leg healed fine, but had his condition worsened, there was a fear he would have to be flown to Sydney, because Canberra doesn't have a children's intensive care unit.
They had to get one of the doctors, which is in the adult hospital, come down and do the surgery and everything. So there is a need for more paediatric specialists, definitely.
Canberra's hospitals service the capital and much of the surrounding region. Patients praise the hard work of staff who support them through the best and worst of times. But it's a hospital system that often seems to be stretched thin. Emergency department waiting times, particularly for patients considered urgent, have for years been among the worst in the country. Many patients on elective surgery waiting lists are waiting longer than they should. And as the city grows, the number of patients the hospital needs to accommodate is also growing. Dr. Antonio Didio doesn't work in a hospital, but he's got plenty of respect for those who do. As the head of the Australian Medical Association in the ACT, he's acutely aware of the challenges the city's health systems face.
It is not unreasonable to describe a great deal of the problems in ACT Health as coming from chronic underfunding.
He argues as Canberra has grown, capacity within the city's hospitals hasn't kept up.
The number of operating theatres has not changed significantly, and the number of hospital beds is almost completely unchanged in the last decade. And that is putting an enormous strain on the system.
There is a plan to fix that, a $500 million expansion of the Canberra hospital due for completion in 2024. Doctors warn it's not a panacea.
I think that plan can be described as a very good start, but it's not going to solve all of the challenges.
Plans to redevelop the Canberra hospital have been in the works for more than a decade. They've been approved, then shelved, and started all over again. Many working inside the system hope this time the plans stick. Work hasn't begun, but the slick concept designs are ready.
Sitting at the heart of our plans for our healthcare system is the Spire project.
The expansion plan includes an entirely new building with hundreds of beds and nearly 24 new operating theatres. It'll double intensive care capacity from 30 beds to 60, including 4 paediatric beds, with construction due to begin next year. But healthcare in the ACT is more than just the state of the hospitals.
Come on, Lulu.
Donna Tresillo is packing the car for another trip north.
Good girl, Lulu.
I have really bad reflux, which sounds quite trivial, I know, even saying that, but it's actually quite a serious issue. I've had it for many years.
She's making the journey to see specialists in Sydney.
I've seen a number of gastroenterologists here in Canberra, but unfortunately what I need in terms of treatment and investigation means I have to travel to Sydney for that.
Okay, off you go.
Donna's situation is common for Canberrans. Even if specialists are available in the ACT, testing and treatment often has to be done elsewhere.
It's amazing that I live in Australia's capital city, and it's difficult for me to find specialists and therapists.
Healthcare in the ACT is a complex story. Patients treated in Canberra are usually treated well, and they're often full of praise for their doctors, nurses and specialists. But it's a system under strain. Improving it will be one of the greatest challenges faced by the next ACT government. Tom Lowry, ABC News, Canberra.
Thanks for joining me for this ABC News special. I hope it's given you food for thought as you prepare to vote in the ACT election. Yarra, take care.